So it's finally time to go over in depth all the mechanical stuff on our 1998 Jeep Cherokee. And that's going to include fluid changes, and I also want to look at the kind of little bit of engine noise that we have going on, and we have since the beginning. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's serious, and I want to find out, because if I sell this thing to somebody, I want to know what's going on, and I don't want to sell them something with an unknown that, you know, might possibly fail on them down the road. So we're going to try to look at that and figure out in depth what it is. We're going to do all the fluids and everything. Hopefully by the end of this we'll have a nice mechanically sound running Jeep, and you know, we'll have all of the any little remaining mechanical issues sussed out here. So come along with the ride as we dig into our Jeep Cherokee in depth. So we're finally gonna change the oil on our Jeep project here, and all the flavor of the day is whatever I could find cheapest. You know, comes in a 5-gallon bucket. What do we got here? I don't know, whatever this is. Mobile 15W40. Don't put 15W40 in your engine. Use what the manual says. I'm gonna use that because that's what I use for all my trucks and tractors. Anywho, we're gonna quick change the oil here, and I got this nice blue tarp laid down so that, you know, when the oil spills I can roll around in it and soak it up with my shirt that much better so it doesn't accidentally get on the ground. And you know, maybe we'll check the coolant and stuff too. I don't know. You know, maybe we'll go overboard. We're not going to do the transmission fluid yet, and here's why. I haven't road tested this, and I don't know what condition the transmission is. I mean, I know the fluid is bad, but I don't know if the solenoids are any good. And if they're not, I want to know that beforehand before I drop the pan, because I don't want to have to drop the pan, change the fluid and filter, and then drop the pan again when I find out that something else in there needs serviced. If the transmission is even any good, I don't know. We know the Jeep moves, but we don't know if it shifts gears. So let's get the oil changed. Pretty much down to a drip now, so I'm just gonna slide my carcass under there and screw the drain plug back in, which looks pretty good. Even the rubber's in good shape, so that's good. Put that back in, and then we'll see if we can find a filter to fit this thing, you know, because I didn't buy one. I'm just gonna look through my back stock. I'm not kidding about that. I didn't actually buy one. I'm just crossing my fingers and hoping I got one on the rack somewhere. Oh, what do we got? I got an auto light filter. Well, okay, let me snake my arms down there. And is it loose? Nope. Need a strap wrench. All right, got the strap wrench. Well, it's the one I use for everything. So see if I can do this one-handed for your entertainment. Probably not. Well, I did succeed in getting it loose. Come on, get on there. Alright, let's see. First time I've dropped a GoPro into an oil pan. Well, what did it look like there down there, fellers? Was the oil good? Maybe kinda sorta. Yeah, kind of works. Okay. Well, I think maybe this one will work. It's roughly the same, and I don't know. Let's see if the thread is the same. Probably not. I never get that lucky, but let's find out. Obviously, you can't pre-fill these things because, you know, well, you can't. They're sideways. Hey, look at that. It's actually threading on. Well, you can't see it, but it is. All right, well, I got a lifetime supply of these, so you like an engine where you can change the oil filter from the top without crawling down around under it. That's good. Just hand tight. Don't need to crank it on there, guys. All right, well, now we can, you know, fill her to the brim with oil. Dipstick says full. I don't believe it because I only put in a gallon, but let's run it and get the oil up to the top. She hasn't been running a while, and we'll see where we're at. We got a serious fire there. My goodness. Why are we arcing? I don't know if this is where this battery terminal is even supposed to go. I think it would go to the engine or something. This seems like a really bad idea, but if I'm keeping this thing, I need to redo the battery cables on here. My goodness. All right, I think this is more like maybe how it's supposed to be. There's kind of a groove there. We just stripped it out. Yeah, probably did. I don't know. Feels kind of rusty back there. All right, well, let's see what we've got for power now. Well, we got a whole lot of nothing. Wow. You know, every day with this thing is an adventure. I'm almost sure this negative battery terminal is not supposed to go to the fender, but I don't know. Oh, there's where it was welding to the screw, holding that thing in. Well, let's clean some of this up a little bit. Instead of doing the right thing and just replacing it, you know. No, it worked before. I didn't change anything. That's kind of why I'm going with just put it back together, you know, for right now. Will this work? Probably not. Definitely stripped now. Well, that's fantastic. Well, where does this normally run, fellas? Can we run it to the AC bracket, or what can we do here? I guess I need to find a bolt and put it where it's supposed to go. I don't know, I could put a nut on the other side of this, I suppose. Really, without drilling a fresh hole, there's nowhere to put it in. I think by the time I get done with this project, I'm gonna have the whole thing rewired, stem to stern. It's gonna be completely restored, and still not worth any more money because it's a Jeep Cherokee. Can't get a drill down there without moving the battery, which I'm clearly too lazy to do. All right, well, I'll get back to you when I have this battery situation sorted. We have, I don't know, some kind of connection there. Let's see what happens. I'll turn it over a little bit. Let's see. Yeah, still in the safe area. Let's see what happens once we fill the filter and bump it up. There's that nice, you know, guards hitting stuff noise again. All right, well, that's our oil change. Now we can throw some coolant in it, and I don't know, guess we need to fix some more of that flex plate chatter. So when we did the video of getting this thing running and actually getting the engine started, it had a bit of clatter to it, which we finally figured out was due to something making noise down in the bell housing area, whether it's hitting the shields, or maybe the bolts for the torque converter are wrong, or maybe the flex plate is cracked. Flex plate cracking in these things is a thing, and it does sound kind of like that if you have one cracked, but I'm not sure. I don't think this is a cracked flex plate because it doesn't happen consistently, for one. And for another, when you rev it up and stuff, it tends to go away. It should be the other way around if the flex plate is cracked, in my opinion. But it still could be an issue, and that's something we'll try to look at when we're down there, but I don't think I can see it. The inspection cover on these things is not big enough. One thing I suspect right now is that when some work was done on this vehicle in the past, maybe the flex plate to torque converter bolts were not correct. Maybe the head sticks out too far, and as it's coming around, it's clipping a shield, or maybe just one of the bolts is wrong. I'm going to crawl down under there and take another look at everything and see if I can verify, because we know that something was hitting from the scrapes and everything on the panels that we took out and the starter and everything else, but we don't know what that was and we haven't found it yet. I'd like to try to figure out what that is, because we're still getting a little bit of that noise every now and then, even when tweaking the covers and everything down there. So I'd like to find that and eliminate it if at all possible. So we did some exploring. Let's take you under and take a look. I don't know if you can see it, but there's a crack between the block and the transmission. Not a crack, a gap. And I believe there's supposed to be a bolt through that hole there. There's no bolt there. I don't know if you can see the gap right about where the end of my flashlight is. There's some separation there, and I think some of the noise might be coming from our misalignment. I think right here, you see that some scrapes and some rust and some clean metal right there. I think that's from hitting this section. It's the only place where I can find that there would be any interference. We need to do something about that gap. I think there's a bolt missing, but when I look at that, it looks like there's a locating dowel. I do not see any signs of flex plate cracking, at least around here. It looks pretty good. That's just a preliminary assessment, obviously. So let's take a look down from the top at that gap we saw. You can see there's kind of a gap there, and that hole is threaded, so I assume there's supposed to be a bolt there, but there's definitely a big gap that shouldn't be there. Just ignore this spot on the cover there where it's banged up. This is not aligned straight. Take a look at some other points and see. Probably won't be able to show on camera if I can even see it myself, but it appears to be pretty good from this side. I know you can't see it on camera, but I think it's just that one side. I think we might have some engine transmission misalignment this way. So I'm thinking that the dowel pin in there, I'm trying to look at it, and it looks like a solid dowel pin, but it's not supposed to be. It's supposed to have a hollow center and a bolt, a 7/16 14 by 3-inch bolt supposed to go through it. Well, from this side, from the transmission back, and it threads into the block. Well, obviously there's no bolt, but I don't think that dowel pin, it should be a dowel sleeve rather than a dowel pin. And to me it looks like there's a dowel pin in there. Let me probe around down there and see if it truly is solid or what the deal is happening there. Well, as you can see, there's a piece of hanger going through that hole, so it is the correct dowel sleeve. We just have to align it and put a bolt through and pull it together, I think. And then we hope that the block isn't stripped out. I mean, there's got to be a reason the bolt isn't in there. I'm hoping it just fell out and there isn't another reason, so well, let's see if we can get those aligned and get a bolt in. All right, I have the transmission and the engine kind of boosted up flat together with a floor jack, and I just happen to have the right 3-inch 7/16 inch by 14 threads per inch grade 8 bolt. If that isn't luck, I don't know what is. After a pitched battle that involved all of those tools, we finally got the one bolt in, and I don't know if you can see it, but she is finally drawn up tight there. So going to the whiteboard for a better description, because when I was out there I couldn't really show it on camera because you know, everything's hidden and inside and threaded and you can't see it. So what we've got here is the transmission bell housing and the engine viewed from the top. And what it's got is this dowel pin that's hollow. The dowel pin is recessed into the block a little bit for locating purposes. The block is threaded to receive the screw that you drive down that clamps the two together. Obviously I've got a gap here. But when you clamp them together, this dowel goes into the recess here, and then the screw locks into the studs here and clamps it together. So this screw, this bolt, goes down through the locating dowel. So what we had was this locating dowel, from being smashed around with the engine and transmission going back and forth and vibrating, the end was mushed over, so I couldn't, when I tried to put the screw in, I couldn't get it past this point to get it threaded into the block. What I did was I took a drift punch, which, you know, a drift punch is shaped like a V, and I kind of took it down here to kind of widen this up a bit and spread these apart. And then I ran a tap down through here, which didn't work. It wouldn't actually tap past these and without causing damage. That was risky. So what I did was I tapped backwards through the block and then tapped through the dowel through these remaining pieces over here on the side of the dowel pin. And then that let me get the screw down through it, and then I could start it in the threads of the block. Moment of truth, we're going to start this and we're going to see what happens. What are we leaking? Oh, that's not good. That's not good at all. Shut her down, we're leaking trans fluid. Leaking it badly. Still got trans fluid in there though. Wow. We got an absolutely horrific front transmission seal leak. You know what that means? It's transmission pulling time. I hate transmission work because I don't have the proper shop set up for transmissions. Even though I do occasionally work on them if I'm in a pinch or somebody offers me a lot of money. But goodness, this is gonna be, oh boy. Well, I'd much rather pull an automatic than a manual, but of course this thing has the transfer case on it, and those things just, you know, the center of gravity is way off. So obviously I have to pull the rear drive shaft and the front drive shaft. That's not really a problem. There's, I don't know, we're gonna have to come back, and we're gonna have to come down because of the floor here. We can only come back a couple inches before the transfer case is gonna start to hit. So we're gonna have to come down and then back. Obviously the cross member has to come off. And I think we actually have to take the exhaust off, strictly speaking, but we probably will rip it all apart. So this is unwelcome. Can't afford parts right now. Just leaking like a sieve. Unfortunately, it appears that that engine transmission misalignment wallowed out the front transmission seal. So of course the only way to change that is to slide the transmission on back. So I guess the next process for this thing, big mechanical wise, is to pull the transmission, replace the seal, and do all the service on the transmission and everything that we need. It works, it just leaks like a sieve and the fluid's bad. So in my preliminary examination that I do before I tackle any project like this, I determined that there's really no bolts holding the transmission and engine together. I was trying to see if they used the original reverse Torx head bolts in the top, or they replaced them with hex, and there's nothing. So when we got this thing, there was only one bolt holding the engine and transmission together. So yeah, any sort of doubt about what was making that horrible clanking clunking noise is now completely gone in my mind. You know, everything flexing down there. End result of that is everything flexed too much and it wallowed out the transmission front seal. Because obviously the torque converter is bolted to the flex plate, which is bolted to the engine, and none of that can really, you know, move this way. But when the transmission moves this way and the engine doesn't, or, you know, one moves one way and one moves the other way, you know, that torque converter shaft is going to move in that seal. And if it moves really hard, it's going to maybe adjust the seal, cut it. So the first thing I'm going to do, so I don't forget, or the first thing I did, so disconnect the transmission pressure cable here. It's not really a kickdown cable, it's a pressure cable, so that if I lower the transmission down, this doesn't get caught and, you know, pull out of one or the other. I don't want to forget that when I'm down underneath and, you know, haven't remembered to disconnect anything up here, because you can't really, without taking the transmission apart, you can't really disconnect it down there. I think I'm going to jack this thing up in the air a little bit so I can have more room to work under it. It's not too bad as it sits, but I'm going to get it up on jack stands just so I have more room. We're going to pull the transmission with the transfer case attached, and because it's an automatic, not a manual, I can just pull it off the studs and drop it down, because there's no input shaft that's in the torque converter. There's no clutch, so I don't have to pull it back off the input shaft. I can just disconnect the torque converter and drop it. Okay, we got her jacked up front and back. She's stable. So next step is to drag myself under there, start pulling off cables and parts. So when I do one of these jobs, the first thing I do is take the big stuff off: drive shafts, exhaust, if any of that needs to come off, and then work my way down to the little stuff. Well, let's drain the transmission fluid. So we've got all of the ancillary things taken off. This cross member came off, except that there's a stud that takes a nut and then a bolt that's threaded. There's a nut that's welded into the unibody up there and a bolt goes through it. Well, on the other side, that snapped off. Despite my very, very careful, you know, lubricant and working back and forth, it still ended up snapping. So we're going to have to drill that out at some point. The cooler lines are loose. I just had to pull them out. They're just kind of seated in there for the moment to keep contamination out of the lines. Right when we're ready to drop it, we'll kind of pull them back a little bit. Let's see. Most of the wiring is disconnected. There's a couple connectors that are really hard to get to that I'm going to have to wait till it's down more so I can get to them, because I don't want to break the plastic on them. I could probably get them if I forced them where they're at. But yeah, drive shaft. I don't even bother to disconnect the drive shaft here. It's just hanging up there with a strap. Front one's completely out. That gave me a little trouble. One of the bolts was rounded, and well, I finished rounding it, so yeah, but I did finally get that one out. I'm just gonna have to get a replacement bolt for that. Exhaust came out. Took it off at this joint here and up at the where it joins the header. And there's something else we're gonna have to fix with the exhaust. There's just a little bit of a dent there, you know, a little bit. I don't know if I have a die or something that I can hammer down in there. press down in there and kind of round it out again. The front drive shaft, the slip yoke was seized. So after some greasing and Scotch-Brite and working back and forth, it did finally unseize, and I think the rubber seal is okay, so that's good. Gonna have to get some new exhaust parts, but that's fairly standard. Transmission mount appears to be okay, and the exhaust hanger appears to be okay. So to pull this out, I think we're going to use our adapter for a floor jack. I did another video on this, and well, it doesn't work the best, but it's what I got. And I'm really poor right now, so we're going to try to use that. I'm not sure if it's going to work or not yet. I gotta kind of hold it up in place and see if it's going to work, but I have adapted this to fit my floor jack instead of using their weird setup, because most modern floor jacks have a screw-in nut here now instead of, you know, kind of a pin sticking out like they had. Anyway, if you want to see that, you can watch the other video. So I'm going to do my setup and then probably actually drop this tomorrow, because I'm getting tired and fighting with all the rust and bolts and exhaust and everything. Well, that took all day, so I want to do this on a fresh brain and a fresh body. So we'll get this set up and then probably pack it in for the day and drop her tomorrow. So what we've got now is the front of the transmission. I got the load center back a bit far, and the front of the transmission wants to go that way a little bit. And this is where, if you had a real transmission jack with real adjusters, you could get it a little better. But to take some of the load off of this cheap adjuster, I'm gonna use my secondary jack, raise the front of the transmission up, and then that'll help loosen my adjuster a little bit so I can get it in the right position. All right, well, good news. Transmission came down okay. I did have to disconnect these two connections up there to get a little bit more slack for the neutral safety switch and whatever's on the other side over there. We do not have a cracked flex plate. Not that I can tell anyway. Get a good look at it there. Underside of this thing, I mean, it's a little dirty, but looks pretty good up in there. No dirt got caught or anything like that. Underside, this thing in general looks pretty good. Got to pull out the torque converter, check out that seal. I mean, I'm sure it's bad. I also want to check the input shaft bearings and or bushing. I'm not sure what's in the AW4, but you definitely need to check those, because with this movement between the engine and the transmission, that could make the input shaft, whatever the input shaft is riding on, suspect. So let me pull the torque converter out of here. Yeah, I mean, that seal, you can see the part of it hanging there. Yeah, I mean, it's just totally blown out. Do the old input shaft shake. Actually, the front of the input shaft doesn't appear to be really loose. So here's the seal we removed, and as you can see, the lip is ripped from the torque converter being too much offset against it. It's bad. Now you can see the damage to this dowel sleeve I was talking about. The end is completely messed up and it got folded over. You can see where I had to, you know, thread it out. Well, not threaded out, but well, you get the idea. I basically had to thread it out. So say what you want about Jeep 4.0 crankshaft position sensors, but this one was still working. Even though the flex plate was rubbing against it. That's melted plastic, and you can actually see the metal steel exposed in there. It was still working. I think we're going to replace that when we put this back together. So the torque converter bushing came off with the torque converter shaft. And really not a good sign. It's also galled on the outside. Not a good sign. And it is tight on there. I'm going to try to get it off, and the shaft isn't scored here, even though it looks like it is. I don't feel anything of significance. Hopefully it's okay under that bushing. And the shaft looks really bad, but no, I don't feel anything. Maybe the slightest bit, but nothing. I don't think that would stop me from reusing it, but let's see about this bushing. Now we can see it out in the light. The shaft under the bushing and everything is okay. I don't feel anything. That isn't to say I haven't measured the clearances yet, but should be all right. This bushing is very, very shot. So I think we got lucky. I think we can just get away with replacing this. It looks like most of the wear came out of the bushing itself rather than the pump housing, so that's good. Well, I mean, I don't see any wear on the pump housing. I think we got lucky with that. Just replacing the seal and the bushing should do the trick. I've had this upside down for a bit, just trying to get out as much fluid as possible, because it is old and burnt. If it wasn't so burnt, I wouldn't worry about it, but, well, I guess that's about as much as is going to come out. That's fine. I might have to do a couple fluid changes on this thing once it's running to kind of get all the fluid out, you know, but that's really the best you can do with the torque converter at the moment without some kind of vacuum systems. Anyway, we got new parts. This is what the bushing is supposed to look like, and this is what the seal is supposed to look like. So, well, I hope they gave me the right stuff. Anyway, we're gonna try to press this bushing in and then press the seal in, of course making sure that the inner diameter is correct. I have to verify that because I don't want to, you know, do this twice, so let's do that. So I'm coating this with Vaseline because Vaseline is your friend. It dissolves in petroleum products with little to no side effects because it is basically oil. So I'm going to make sure that we have the proper seal here just to verify. It's not that I don't trust my suppliers. So yep, I'll have a nice seal there. I do feel a little bit of grooving in there as I move it down, but without replacing the torque converter, there's not much I can do. We might still have a tiny leak during operation. I don't think it's going to seal 100% just because this isn't perfectly smooth. I could try like Scotch braiding it or something, but it's just the tiniest of groovings. I think for the most part we're going to be okay. So bushing. So yes, oh yeah, that's a perfect fit for the bushing. It's not tight like the other one is from being hammered around in there. That'll just slide in. You shouldn't have any looseness, just enough to turn it, and it shouldn't bind and it shouldn't be tight. That's going to go into the transmission, and we're going to coat that, make sure that has a good coating. This is a dimpled seal, so until we can get some fluid into there, we want to make sure that that's lubricated. There we go. Let me get my seal pressing inning tools, and then we'll go put those into the transmission, and then we'll slip the torque converter up into place. Probably re-lube that. Probably took some Vaseline off, but it is nice and lubed. That's good. Definitely don't want to cut that new seal when we put it in. already going to have enough issues as it is. Alright, so this should be a good seal driver for the bushing. That should be about right. Has a hollow center. If you're wondering where I got this, I have a full collection of these because several times I have rebuilt a bunch of transmissions, and this is actually a factory Ford kit for, well, it's off of a CVT for a Ford 500 car. If you're familiar with those, most people aren't. I had a batch of bad input shafts, and I got some experience in rebuilding them. So anywho, I find that a lot of these are very similar to most transmission input shaft sets. So recoat this, and we'll go put this into the nose of the transmission. A lot of room to work down here. Am I getting it? Normal. Just gotta keep it. A lot of room to swing the hammer here. It's going in. Gotta make sure you do this right, because you don't get more than one chance, you know. That's why I'm doing it the wrong way. I think we may be in. You can't drive it in too far with the seal driver because the lip overhangs a little bit, and it'll hit the metal of the transmission pump housing if you try to drive it in too deep. I think we're in nice and even, shockingly, despite my best efforts to mess it up. All right, now we just got to get the seal in. All right, got our seal. Careful not to rip it or anything on there. Just get it started there. Okay, and a few gentle taps with this driver should seat her. As soon as I figure out what I did with my hammer. Come on now. Okay. Feel around the edge. Okay. Oh, there we go. Now, I gotta see if I can ease the torque converter onto there. I'm gonna get my arm out of here. Ah! I mentioned I hate working on transmissions while they're in the vehicle. Alright. Sometimes you just don't have a choice. You're in your backyard. Alright, this is the fun part because of the weight of the torque converter. Get the distinct feeling that this is gonna hurt a lot tomorrow. Okay, now we can get our. Alright. Not going in far enough. They're still not engaged in all the splines. I can tell just because I've done this too many times before. Let me get the front elevated a tad. Oh, it's going down. What do you do then? I don't know. I don't know. Is it wedged? All right. Need to go get another jack. Okay. Oh, got a jack under the transfer case. Uneven weight. Still got to get this torque converter seated. Pulling it out. Just take it up here. Rotate it. Come on. Not engaging with the pump. Come on. Oh, there. Did we get it? I think we got it. Oh, there we go. Okay, 3 steps. All right, now we're engaged. I think that's about as far in as we can go. I did feel 3 engagements. All right. So now we begin the tricky procedure of getting this thing back up in. Yippee! Now they say, I don't know if this has, they say you're supposed to put lubricant or Vaseline on the front of this because supposedly there's a pilot bearing some of the manuals on the AW4, but I don't know if Jeep used that. And it doesn't matter anyway, because once it's bolted to the flex plate, it'll stay centered. I'm not sure why they tell you to do that on a torque converter, honestly, but they do tell you to do it. I'm probably going to do it just to make sure. I mean, because the manual says, and I don't want to do it twice. So, yeah. And then we're going to try to get this thing up into position. So I've got 3 jacks here now because I don't have 1 transmission jack. So, yeah, this is gonna be fun. I'm gonna relocate you guys because I may need to adjust the engine position. So we got the transmission back up in place. We're just holding it up at the rear there at the transfer case. Gonna put the support in, and then we can just plug everything in as we go. And there's a few more, you know, got to bolt the torque converter in, a few more bolts, drive shafts, all that stuff. Then we'll be good. So, you know, then we can find out what else we did wrong. And after all that's done, then I'm gonna change the transmission fluid. Well, there's not much left in it, so I'm going to pull that down, replace the filter, and then replace the transmission fluid. All right, all the peripherals are hooked up here. I did do a filter change, which was just a pain. I don't know why, but you know, everybody thinks I got to use Gob's RTV on the gaskets. I got that done. I got to dump some fluid in her. I got everything plugged back in and hooked back up, except for the 4-wheel drive. I don't have the shifter, or I don't have the transfer case or the front hooked up. I want to test it, you know, because knowing my luck, I ripped the seal or something putting it in, and I'll just have to do it again. So tomorrow, when I'm fresh, gonna put fluid in it and fire it up. It's a new day. I think it's time to pour transmission fluid in and start her up and see what we broke now, and you know, did we manage to fix the seal? Knowing my luck, probably not. It'll start leaking again. I don't know. In other news, check out this mushroom that just, you know, practically overnight just sprouted up through my shop floor here. Those things grow fast. All right, we got fluid in it. You know, the cheapest available. Oh, I'm just kidding. It's a Walmart brand, but you know, it still meets the same specifications. Somewhere on here, I don't know. Anyway, it's Dexron 3 Mercon. You know the drill for an AW4. So I disconnected the battery. She's resetting her. Gotta goose the throttle a little bit to start her up. She sounds much, much better. None of that horrible clanking and knocking that we were getting before. Let me show you. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Just a normal noise. Everything's perfectly normal now. We do have a little bit of an exhaust leak because I didn't put the clamps back on yet. No leaks. I give that a solid thumbs up. So we'll let her warm up to full operating temperature here, and then we'll make sure the fluid's spot on. And then we're not done. We got to go in and put in the front drive shaft with the broken bolt, and we got to drill out the broken cross member bolt, and you know, put the exhaust clamps back on and that sort of thing. So just some tidying up in general, and then we can drop her down and, you know, test out. I know the gears work because I have her up in the air, and you know, I was going for it. So yeah, that's good. So we finally found the answer and confirmed it about the noise it was making from the time we got it. And that was the engine wasn't bolted solidly to the transmission, and that joint was flexing around, you know, really loose. And so the torque converter, which is bolted to the flex plate, was also flexing and moving around in relation to the transmission input and pump shaft and everything. And the bushing that the torque converter rides in, and it actually unseated the bushing onto the torque converter and deformed it a little bit, so it was clamped onto the torque converter and blew out the seal at the same time. So that noise we were hearing was the whole engine to transmission and torque converter to input shaft relationship clonking around in there just a little bit, just a hair. And we confirmed that everything got hooked up again because, you know, the CPS worked. Interesting story. I got the new CPS out, crankshaft position sensor, and went to put it in, and then I totally grabbed the wrong one. So the new one is still sitting here. So the one it's running on is that old one that was actually ground down by the flex plate a little bit. So, you know, it works fine. So for right now, we're going to leave it in there because it's not too bad to change if you need to. And if we sell this thing, I'll just sell the new CPS along with it, like the last person did in the glove compartment. And, you know, next person can swap it out easy if they need to, if they get in a bind. So on to tidying up. All right, moment of truth. We're going to drive this thing after all the work we've put into it and everything. This is the, you know, the culmination of all our hard work. Will it explode? I don't know. Let's find out. All right. Time has come. Sounds really good. Get my seatbelt on, safety third. Got reverse. That's a good sign. Watch out for the bush. All right, here we go. Now, will we have all the gears? I'm gonna count them now. Second. License or registration. Drives really good. Gravel road now. Not a lot good. Let's make sure we're not leaking anything. I don't see anything leaking. Engine temperature is good. Pop the hood here. I don't know if you can hear it, but there's a little bit of uneven fire, just the tiniest bit of uneven firing. And I think part of that is due to the old fuel. This gas is actually a couple years old. We're still running on the original gas, I think, from when it came out of the barn. Which, it's doing pretty good for being original gas. Check the oil here. Oh yeah, perfect. Actually, the oil is really clean. Let me start her up and check the transmission fluid. Transmission fluid looks really good. So that's going to wrap it up for all the mechanical and oil and fluid changes and everything for this. And finally, resolving that engine noise from when we got her running. If you stuck with us this long, thanks for watching. I always appreciate it, and we always appreciate any likes or subscribes you can give us. I appreciate comments. I do read all the comments, and I appreciate each and every one. So thank you for that. But as always, most important of all, thanks for watching. So sometimes you find yourself in a bind and you just need something painted. Well, I have the solution for you. Make sure you pick a nice ice cold Dr. Pepper. It has to be cold now. It has to be the red kind if you want to get the result I want, because I want to match this nice red paint on the Jeep, you know, as close as I can. So you take your Dr. Pepper and you just kind of, you know, splash it over there, and you know, you'll have a nice coating of Dr. Pepper red. Pretty good match for the, you know, no, not really.